American businessmen John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. Why were John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie important? These two American businessmen revolutionized business in the early 1900s. They had large companies, Andrew Carnegie owning Carnegie Steel and John D. Rockefeller owning Standard Oil. Even though they were important businessmen, they did a lot of philanthropy work and donated vast amounts of personal money. John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller's early life. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in Richford, New York. Early, his family moved to Cleveland, Ohio. He was not afraid of hard work and had a variety of different jobs growing up. During the Civil War, Rockefeller surveyed the oil business and believed this is where he'd make a name for himself. In 1863, he opened his first oil refinery, and in 1870, he decided to start Standard Oil with his brother William Rockefeller and Henry Flagler, their business partner. John had the most shares in the company. The company kept expanding and it did very fast. Rockefeller bought out smaller oil refineries in Ohio, and Standard Oil owned 20 Cleveland companies by the end of 1 month in 1872, thus being called the Cleveland Massacre. Also, the company expanded by keeping production costs down and receiving reasonable rates on the railroad from Cornelius Vanderbilt. And he would buy out his competitors. That was the main way of expanding his business. By the mid 1870s, the company absorbed or forced other companies out of business. These actions by Rockefeller were leading Standard Oil Company to become a monopoly. For example, after he expanded to New York and Pennsylvania, he controlled one half of Pittsburgh Oil, and by 1879, he owned 90% of America's oil production. In 1880, he made Standard Oil of Ohio and placed stock in it controlled by a board of trustees, creating the first trust. Many believe that he did this by illegal business actions. He was investigated in 1888, and in 1906 he was brought to court again. The trial took place in 1908 and was decided that due to the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was meant to limit monopolies, that the company had to split. By the 20th century, they were not as big of a company as they were before and merged with Vacuum Oil Company. The Standard Oil of New Jersey became the Exxon Corporation. After his company, he started to focus on charity work. John D. Rockefeller believed in large donations that would make large impacts. His main focus was higher education, and he played a key part in building the University of Chicago. At first, he donated $60,000, but in the total amount, he donated $30 million. He also funded the Rockefeller Medical Research Center and created the Rockefeller Foundation. This was done by donating 73,000 shares worth $50 million. This charity gave out large amounts of foreign aid. Rockefeller made such an impact, and he still did, that his family commissioned the Rockefeller Center in New York. At his death, he was worth $340 billion today. Andrew Carnegie is one of America's most famous industrialists and is an example of the American dream, immigrating from Scotland. He was a very hard worker and became a telegram messenger working with Thomas Scott. This is where he learned to make money. He was traveling to Britain and saw their demand for iron and steel, sparking his interest. In 1870, he created the J. Edgar Thomson Company that turned into the Carnegie Steel Company. By 1870, he invested all of his money in steel. He had ties with European companies and had worked with steel industry leader Henry Bessemer, who taught him how to make high-quality steel and manufacture it at low cost. This is how he revolutionized the business industry. Back home, he kept doing his business this way. He also implemented vertical integration, which means all aspects of the company and its stages are controlled by that company. Carnegie's first order was a very large one, and it was to redo the Pennsylvania Railroad. In 1901, Carnegie sold Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan for $480 million. This transaction made him the richest man in America. Andrew Carnegie was a true philanthropist. He gave over $350 million, which would equal billions today, showing just how successful he truly was. One organization he created was the Carnegie Corporation of New York. This was the largest trust ever set up at the time in 1911. It was designed to expand education something Carnegie was passionate about. Carnegie spent $55 million on building libraries. Another donation by him was the Carnegie Mellon University. He donated $1 million to create the university for the working class men and women in Pittsburgh so that they could get an education. Carnegie Hall was one of his most well-known achievements. It would cost him $1.1 million, around $25 million today. It's known as America's best music hall. Another reason he was so invested in philanthropy was he wrote the Gospel of Wealth. The Gospel of Wealth explained that there was a major inequality between the rich and the poor, and that it was the richest job to use their money for better use, and that they should be a part of philanthropy. Also, that wealth is not only spent but should help produce more wealth, allowing the poor to develop wealth. In conclusion, these two men were important in American business because they helped innovate it. They not only gained a lot of personal wealth but redistributed out their wealth to help the common good.